like I'm gonna keep it like very simple. Hopefully you all get like a chance to really understand, maybe follow along as well, like the entire walkthrough. My hope is that you, after this session, really take an understanding of what Retool is, obviously, but like how do I build an agent from start to finish? What is an agent, and like why should I, why should I think about this when I'm building systems in general? And then if you have time, like I can show you something after the Retool Agents product. We just launched Retool Agents earlier this month. In fact, Bala and I were talking about doing this session, but I couldn't show this. So then I was like, okay, let the launch happen. The launch happened a few weeks ago, and then we set this right. Cool. I think to like take a step back, and we wanted to really talk about like what is the problem, like Retool, and like we have been solving for the last, like, Retool started in 2017, so about 8 years. And like why we started building in this space. So most of you, I assume, work for like a startup or maybe a larger tech company, and you tend to, build everything on the customer facing side, right? And I'm sure some of you also work on the internal tools, but a lot of the focus when you're at a maybe a consumer company, or like really any company, is like you're trying to service the customer, and customer first. Like whatever the customer is working on in terms of, like, let's say you're Swiggy, you obviously have more engineers and more product managers working on the Swiggy app potentially. um, or I think if you're maybe like Facebook or Instagram, all of these, like everyone is really focusing on what the customer is doing. Now, what tends to get like left behind, and I do think a lot of companies do focus on this, but in general, I think this always takes a back seat. And we noticed this when me and Bala worked at Bounce. I'm sure Praveen's seen similar problems at Swiggy. Is that what gets left in the backlog are these long tail of these, maybe like what we call internal tools, and these are things that make you more efficient as a business. Like there are things that your support team needs, or your, let's say, client management team needs, or your operations team, just to do their specific job. And what normally happens, and this is sort of where the need for Retool came at when we were using it, was the engineering team is building both the external and internal tool at the same time. So let's assume that you're shipping a feature. Every feature you ship tends to have an like internal like SOW that they have to follow. So if we shipped Retool agents today, a lot of customers are going to come with questions about Retool agents. Maybe you have to enable it. Maybe we want to build a feature flagging system. People are just going to keep coming and asking for that. For that, we need to enable our customer support teams so that they can take actions that are important. But obviously, we generally think this gets left in the backlog, like I said. And what we're trying to do at Retool is essentially lower the line here of how we bring all these tools for our internal operations as well, and make that entire process much easier. We think of it as changing the economics of software development tools by lowering this line, right? So this would allow many, and in my case, in Bala's case, even like technical adjacent teams to potentially build if they have the basic skill set. And I think with AI, we're obviously seeing a lot more of people self-serving their own tools and their own workflows. So with that, I think just an overview of like everything we do in Retool, and I won't be able to cover all of this, but I will say we primarily start with internal web apps. Think client management portals, customer support dashboards. I mean, I think we built like refund dashboard was the first tool that I in Retool. And Bala, fun fact, when I joined Retool, it was the top 5 viewed refund app. I think too many people wanted refunds when we were working at Bounce, or we just had a problem we didn't know. but it was like the top 5 most viewed apps of all time when I joined. So
So
that's
what's interesting also here is that when we started, product managers were the first ones to use these tools, at least in advanced we knew. Probably not the same case in all the geographies, but as you said, technical adjacent folks, a lot of us build these products on Retool. But later you guys become too technical, only focus on developers.
no,
Uh,
sir, I agree with you. I think generally what I noticed like when I worked in India and like US, like difference was really just how closely the product managers and companies like startups work close to the technical problems. And I think half of us studied engineering anyway, right? So I think we also kind of went into that problem solving mode from an engineer mindset. And that was something that took a while to sort of realize when I worked with customers in the US. People have different names for all these teams that work on this. I think we started with engineers in Silicon Valley. Internal tools still fall under engineering and tends to be a very engineering heavy decision. So if I work with like Netflix is like entire decision making here is very much in the engineering landscape, and they're using Retool in the engineering teams. Having said that, I work with like a product manager at a startup, or I will be working with, these, I would say, like analyst, technical, like citizen developer kind of folks as well, and data engineers a lot, because Retool obviously lets you uh, query SQL, and using SQL, you can actually get pretty far. So I would say the most interesting thing that's happened over the years is like the data persona really evolved, where people are building dashboards, but then they're building actions on their dashboards that allow them to like make real progress on their entire workflow. So the tool becomes not just a dashboard, but also something where I can process a refund, I can like take an action on a claim, I can generate a report and things like that. Right. So the whole like universe of internal, external mobile apps. Fun fact, like last year I worked on Burger King's like franchise app that every franchise owner uses. So um, I I worked on all these products, and now on the Gen AI side, we have a lot of interesting stuff that I want to show you today. Right. Just a like overview of like the kind of customers we work with. All these folks currently use Retool for their day-to-day work. And OpenAI also, a lot of friends work there from Retool who went and they build all their sales and customer success tools using Retool, and from small startups to like really large companies. So like Pernod Ricard, UCLA, like you'll see like very like diverse sort of uh, group of people, and their tools are very different from each other. So I won't be able to cover everything, but this is like a broad overview of like the kinds of folks that are already like where we're already embedded, and the and who we talk to like build our roadmap essentially, right? So what we're trying to think about next is how do we enable those folks to be the application layer for their AI. And just when I like talk about this is something that we like worked with NVIDIA for. So I think all of us in this room probably have heard about NVIDIA, so I'm not going to explain what they do. But they're like director of engineering and product, uh, wanted to use Retool to essentially manage their GPU clusters, right? And uh, they had connected everything to the Retool system, and then on top of that, he wanted to build a nice chat interface that allowed him to essentially think like a very custom GPT that allows you to manage those clusters completely with natural language. And we built this in like 2 weeks. We have other solutions as well, but generally this upgraded the way they allocate GPU compute. And obviously great to work with like the sort of pioneers in this space. And this really allows us to understand like this is pre the agents product. So all the learnings we did building this and other customers sort of informed how we think about agents and what agents are. I assume, Bala, there's no like major question. I'm just going to move on to agents now. But this is like hopefully a good overview of what Retool does. Think of it as a low-code platform to like build any kind of app, workflow, or AI agent that you want to like need inside your company. Cool. So before we jump into like what like agents is, I think what tends to happen is people use these words very similarly. So I just want to be very clear about what an agent is in our universe. There's no like set definition of agent. I will tell you that everyone has like a little bit of a nuance to it. I think most people are saying the same thing, but just for that, I'm going to explain in our like language what it is. So an LLM is obviously a large language model. So think of that as like OpenAI's O3. Workflow that we call it is essentially something that has a start and an end. It connects to a resource and it has like multiple steps and it follows specific steps. Think of it as control flow in your code base. So like line 1, line 2, line 3, and it connects to what we call resources, and resources are like data sources, and it allows you to add code to it. This is like this is what a retool workflow looks like. Now, a Gen AI workflow is something where you make an LLM call in the middle of that. An agentic workflow is something where we use the LLM to decide the path we should take. So think of this as instead of having an if this then that, we just have an LLM that actually does the decision making. Now, this is where things get really interesting. When we were building all these workflows for people, we realized we already had an AI like system that we didn't know about. We just integrated like blocks for letting people make calls to AI. But there was this like one piece I was missing was how do we get like how do we design a system that makes it easy for anyone to build their own like what we call agent, and an agent is something that decides how and when to use what tool. And when we say tool, it could be like a database call, it could be an API endpoint, it could be a web scrape, right? So the LLM is given a system prompt. It's deciding when and what tool it needs to use, how many times it needs to use it. It's deciding everything, right? So instead of being part of the workflow, like somewhere in the middle, it's the start and it decides when it finishes. I'm just giving it everything like the universe of like actions I want to give it. Be like, you figure out, you're the chef, what ingredients you need to like complete this action.
So
And
just to kind of understand this better, so we had few sessions on agent.ai, relay.app, etc., where the flow is kind of like linear, where
yeah,
you use nodes in between, just like this, just like the agentic workflow. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But in this case, it is more like a chat GPT where you have an LLM plus a bunch of tools. It just keeps retrying until the process is complete.
So this is very important to understand, and I think I'll try to explain it. Uh, Maybe just use this slide. The Think of it as not like uh, earlier we had to connect and decide the path it has to follow. Now I don't decide anything. I just put random blocks of code and tell it, I have written these 5 functions for you. I have connected Slack. I have like connected our database here. And I explain that in natural language. And then the LLM decides which tool to call when for what action, right? So you don't need linear flows. You just need to give a system access to tools. And I think you would have heard this a few times from people that like tools are like everything or evals are everything. So when I say tools, it's just like giving access to your system. And in our case, we try to make sure you give access in the right way as well. Like we want to make sure you have permissions and the right people can take those actions. Um, yeah, I think like it is in a way similar to like giving access to MCP. You can integrate MCPs as well. Retool is essentially like a central place where we want you to build your applications. That can be your apps, agents, or workflows. So in terms of like what the agent is doing is it is deciding its own future, how many times it's going to run, and it's doing this all in natural language. We're just giving you the abstraction to do that, right? First, people would write like a line, like a Python script, let's say, deploy that Python script somewhere. Then came like our low code solution, which allowed you to sort of do if this, then that, if this, then that, and then decide. Then we added LLMs in the middle, which like decided for us. And then finally we said, actually, the LLM is pretty good at doing this stuff these days. Like with O3 and Claude, we have like kind of seen that let's just give it the ingredients and ask it to pick and decide when the food is ready, right? We're not going to do that for them. And that's sort of like that took a while for people to, because this is at the end of the day very different, and like it's almost like against our instinct. We call it like deterministic software was like the previous thing. This is the future of non-deterministic software. So software that is like kind of random, right? Like it's acting like a human would, and it's taking decisions like a human would, which opens up a whole room of possibilities in our opinion. So yeah, I think all kinds of like, think of agentic workflows as the assembly line. AI agents are autonomous workers. We think of them actually like interns. Like Bala has 20 interns. These are the 20 interns he's created. And then finally, you can have a manager that controls those 20 interns as well, right? So you can build your org chart that way. Cool. I think that's a lot of like discussion on what an agent is and all that stuff. Once I show it to you, hopefully this will get like a lot like clearer. Let me just hide this so you can see the full view. And now, like I said, I think what we're building is a full stack toolkit for building, deploying, and managing AI agents across your enterprise system, right? So it's not just about like building this agent. It's also like, how do you monitor this agent? How do you make sure that it's not doing actions that you like haven't given it permissions to? How are you keeping costs under control? These kinds of things are very important. So we think of this as bringing reasoning to your stack, where you can stitch together LLMs, custom tools, and business logic to finally automate work, which is things like drafting briefs, syncing your systems, escalating issues, following up across teams, and then not requiring to hard code all those edge cases. So we're starting here at the home page. This is where we can like view all the agents in our system right now. So this is what Retool looks like. This is agents. This is the home of the agents product. And I know a lot of you will be like not familiar with the Retool, but I think we'll try to like be slow and go over things as much as I can. This is the home page. Over here, you can obviously create a new agent by clicking this button, create a new folder. You can manage your agents and folders by switching from grid to table view. And then if I click on any of these, I'll go into my agent. I just want to spend a little bit time on the left-hand side to show you your entire universe of things you can do. And this is like one of my favorite pages. It's the monitor page. So this is showing all your agents running and a visual graph of it, as well as like while they're running, you can actually see on the right-hand side what's happening, right? So this is our demo. This is what's up?
Is this live? All the things that are happening on the right?
These are the ones that have happened 2 weeks ago, but yes, this is all live. So 42 minutes ago, I was testing the get linear issues agent and the expense policy. So all of the things that are showing you is live, and this is across the company. I can essentially go, if I want to go to a specific one, I hover, I can see all the previous runs, and I can also like click on it over here. So if I go into like the one I was looking at, I can actually like see the specific runs at an agent level, right? And over here, we have like the view of every run, how many runs happen for this agent. If I go back, obviously this is doing it at the entire org level, and then showing you token usage, cost, runtime, and all the runs. Things that like people like really care about. I think one of the things that has been very important from our research has been that people are concerned where like agents and like code written by agents are out in the wild in their code base and in their company that they don't know and can't keep a control over, right? So this dependency graphs will show you the entire universe of agents. If and you can one agent can use different tools and they can share tools, so they'll actually get connected as a graph. um, and all of these over here will be common tools that are being used, and the total runtime of these tools in this instance. Yeah, I think like you said, is there like a live flow? You can actually see there's nothing running right now, but in the past 2 weeks, past 1 week, you can filter that, and hopefully your DevOps or engineering head is not getting any scares about what people are doing in the system, right? And we have like templates. These are just you know quick and easy like templates that we have created for you to like not start from a blank canvas. There's also, I like thinking of this as where you can get ideas and inspiration of the stuff you can do. Our engineering team is sitting and like adding stuff to this constantly. I just submitted a template request as well. But yeah, I think you'll keep seeing more and more templates here and how you connect to different agents. How you can like think of ideas of other agents that you might have. Cool. I think, Bala, that's sort of the basics, right? I'm going to go into an agent I was working on last night. And as I was telling you, this is like what the agent view looks like. So what I want to be very clear about is that I think someone asked about build and ML models. No, I think we are agnostic, and we will give you access to use the LLM you choose. And so think of this as the application layer where you will interact with your LLMs in the future. Or I hope so. Anyway, this is the chat. I want to remind everyone that an agent over here, this chat is just the place that I would say you can use this, but you can also embed this anywhere, or you don't need a chat. You can have this running in behind. So you can trigger it via an email, a workflow, or an app. We obviously have this like nice chat window. I'll get to that later, but let's go into like how do we configure it first, and then we'll see the fun stuff. Right. So like I said, this is like basically the main like what you will be doing your prompting, and like this is the brain of the agent, right? So if I look at the monitoring tab as a command center, this is the brain of my agent. The project pal, so project pal, think of it as we were thinking, okay, you have daily stand-ups every day, and like someone on your team is either assigned to take notes and then also file the action items, the bug requests, the Jira tickets, right? So we use a system called Linear, and we basically built this like project pal to the program manager who can just use this instead of like having to interact with Linear and going and manually creating issues and updating requests, right? So it just analyzes meeting transcripts and it like updates the Linear system completely on its own. Now, how do we set this up, and like when does this run? So like I said in the beginning, the triggers, this is obviously, you can trigger this using chat, email, so the chat that I showed you, but also inside of any Retool app, inside of any Retool workflow, and in the future, more systems you can trigger this from, like Slack potentially, right? So today we like support chat, email, and then triggering it anywhere inside of Retool. People already have a bunch of tools that they use every day, so that really helps. And then a workflow is something that can run in the background. So you can set it up as a schedule. You want to run this agent every morning at 9 a.m. after your stand-up meeting, you can do that. Okay. And over here, this is the system prompt, right? You would have seen this in a few places when you're setting this up, but what we want to put in our system prompt and what I have put here is essentially the basic information about who the agent is chatting with. And we have this double curly notation in Retool that we use everywhere, but it essentially allows me to give it access to my information like email, first name, full name, even permissions that I have. And also inside of this is just JavaScript. So I can actually also just write JS code, right? So I'm giving it the date so that I know which meeting to analyze. And then after that, it's giving it some primary responsibilities as my project pal. And very important, explaining all the tools in natural language. So I'm not like doing anything in terms of I'm connecting it to the tool and telling it in natural language exactly what it's doing. So one of the tools, I'll get to the tools at the bottom where I've configured it, is like getting the transcript and creating issues. Okay. Also, I'm adding some core behaviors and constraints, telling it like when responding to a user, what are the things it should care about. So never create tasks without clear ownership and context. Uh, respect privacy when discussing with individual performance. These kinds of things, like you can just explain it and the agent will like act on its act. Try to use your instructions the best way. Prompt engineering is an art, I would say, not a science. So you should play around, and just in case you're like don't want to do this, we have a chat agent that can configure your agent. So in a very meta way, you don't need to like configure this. You can just chat with the config assistant and it'll write your prompt and connect your tools as well. Right. Moving down, like someone asked about models. You can pick any model, right? So the whole point is that, and our belief is that models are going to keep fighting with each other. That's fine. You want to like have access to the model that you want for the right task, and OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, but also any custom model. Like if you have a custom model inside of your company, you can set that up as well as a resource. And then some advanced settings that you might have seen, like temperature and max iterations, right? So temperature is nothing but deciding if the output of this agent should be predictable or random on a scale of 0 to 100. So if I wanted to be like very predictable in this case, because it's like project management, I wanted to be very predictable. If I was doing like generate like 5 crazy blog posts that I could write this year, maybe I wanted to be very creative, right? And think of it like really think of it this as your intern, right? So you want someone who is like coming up with new ideas or following a process every day. And then max iterations is just the number of times the agent should run before it gives up, right? So you're like, okay, there can be many issues with this agent. If there's like a lot of like different tasks, maybe the API endpoint is always down. Let's say you're like working with the Parivahan API and you're like, the Parivahan API is down like 3 times a day for like hours. I know it's not, but I'm giving an example. And you're like, we have no control over that, so let's just like let it run like as much as we can and set the max iterations to very high. Obviously this will increase your costs, and you can balance that out in our monitoring tool. And then finally, like I said, very important, right? Like this stuff you can put in ChatGPT and it'll give you some answer. But what it will not be able to do is take the actions. The action needs to be done by tool configuring. And this is where I will promise you spend a considerable amount of time. But again, a lot of this you're doing in just English, and you're just probably following the docs of another website to connect Retool to the system that you're trying to connect to, right? In our case, we have set up an example endpoint that gives us all the transcripts for our stand-up meetings that happen every Monday. Then get a specific transcript if the user is asking for it. Get linear users. Linear is our Jira or like, project manager for our engineering sprints, and then creating an issue, obviously, right? So we're trying to keep the scope very simple for this. We're not saying this agent is doing like 800 people's jobs. We think it's really important to like keep the scopes limited so you can like keep it predictable in this case. Um, and finally, send an email. This is a default tool that we provide as well. But now, how do you configure these tools, right? So I'm just going to go straight into like the add tools section. And what you will notice here, and I think there was a question about MCPs, is how do you connect this to like an MCP server? Can I connect this to Google Docs, Google Calendar? You have some default native connectors, at the same time connecting it to like search the internet for you, like if you had a deep research kind of agent. And then finally, you can also add another agent as a tool, and you can import other tools from other agents. So that's a lot of information. Think of it as this is where I can do everything. I can connect it to itself in a way. Like if I want the project manager to talk to the expense manager, I can like make sure the project manager is talking to the expense manager or talking to the engineering manager agent. Right? Maybe there's three agents that are talking to each other. I can connect those as well. Um, you can connect an MCP server. So you can do this simply by adding a resource, since that was a question that I saw in the chat. And then very simply, I think the most basic thing is just creating a custom tool for the agent. And that's as simple as, putting a name for this and then going into edit function setting. And it gives you this interface that allows you to connect directly to whichever thing you have. So let's say, I have a SQL database, I have a REST endpoint, I can, connect it to any of these things. And if I want to like even like write some custom code, I can like do that as well. If I want to add another AI action, I can do that as well. But yeah, this is sort of like where I would give it the linear API in the example, and then this is a GraphQL endpoint. So I'll just give it the exact thing it needs. So in the case of get transcripts, I'll give it like the query if you get all transcripts or like a single transcript, right? So and this is something that like you can really imagine you can connect to anything, because that's sort of what everyone wants to do in Retool at the end of the day. Okay, that's how you connect the tool. And I've like tried to make sure that, like I would love to build all of this from scratch, but there's just so much to cover. And I want to make sure you guys really understand, if you start today, what is possible. Okay, you'll be like, great, I've made this tool, right? I've connected everything to it, and I've like added all these triggers, but it's just like I don't know what's happening. So like I want to know what's happening every time I run it. And that's why we like have logs. And each of these tabs over here are like things that I would tell you that like customers have asked us even before we were like consider giving them an agent, like like an agent platform, what would be important, and then we built it backwards and tried to build the abstraction that would make it easy for you to build, but also really make sure that you can deploy this in a production setting. So obviously, once I've given this agent and it's like out in the universe, people are like going and doing different things with this agent. I want to make sure like I have a track record of every run and what the agent did in that run, right? So yeah, when it's like getting a linear issue or getting a transcript, like each of those runs are like logged. And then finally, even though you have like these runs that you have this tracking, what you potentially really want is like, let's say I go ahead and make a tweak to like a specific prompt. Let's say I'm prompt engineering. I'm like, okay, this prompt is something I don't think is like working every time. Let me make changes to it. Now, you actually obviously want to make a change, but you want to make sure the change is useful, right? Like you want to make sure that it's making an improvement, or it's like worst case, at least as good as it used to be. And that's where what we call the universe of evals comes in. Evals is just a way for you to have a suite of test cases. The AI world has given new names to all these things. So like just like I think when you search for eval, it might be like, oh, it's this new thing. All it is like a group of test cases and it's a test suite that you run, right? So and data sets is a specific test case. So obviously, when I deploy software in the wild, I want to test that software. So I will have specific test suites I will run before I will say push it to prod, right? And that's as simply as like me being able to go here and be able to describe a data set and what is important for this agent. So let's say I want to make sure that it gets all the tickets from linear, and when I ask it that, it is choosing that tool every time. And when I say get this transcript on this date, it is choosing the get transcript tool, and that just looks like this, for example. So it's just like selecting like the choice of tool is so important and the expected parameters. And so I've created these three basic test cases and made sure that whenever I want to like go ahead and make a change, I'm actually like running this against what is called an eval. So eval run 100, let's say. I'm just going to go and import that data set, and it's going to make sure that before I like do anything, this is actually working, right? Looks like, I mean, I didn't set up that many test cases. It's 3 test cases, so it's running every time. And finally, I think back to where this looks like now to actually run this agent. I have run this agent on this transcript so many times that it's not going to create new tickets probably, but let's see what happens, right? So be like, I ran this like yesterday's transcript, or this is a specific date. This is a dummy database, and it's like create a new linear issue for all tickets that aren't yet accounted for in the project, right? So this is a dummy prompt. I'm going to give it, and now let's see like what is happening. And what you will notice is right now what is doing is that it's going to when it's thinking, it's taking this prompt, putting it against the system prompt that you put, and breaking down the task that it needs to do. So it's actually gone ahead and decided to use the get transcript tool. And on the right hand side, you can actually see everything that's happening live. So you feel like you know exactly what it's doing, and it's not super unpredictable, and you can actually like step through every action. And it's getting all the linear issues right now. So while it's thinking, right, what I wanted to also like talk about is that at the end of the day, this is going to be as good as like your imagination is, right? This is the stuff that I think about because we have these. Bala and I have been in these kind of meetings and trying to make sure that things are on track and everything is logged. And so looks like these tickets have already been logged, and it looks like this is the current status in linear. There is no on track action. So it got the transcript from the meeting, it got the linear issues, but then it accurately did not create new tickets, right? And just to show you when it created the tickets, I think somewhere in the back, like yesterday, must have created tickets for me. Oh, I think it's gone. Let me go to a new like sort of app so you just see like an end-to-end workflow of using this agent inside of an application. Bala, any like major questions right now before I jump to like a
Yeah, so a couple of them asked about guardrails, which is mostly evals, right?
Yeah.
There is one question on governance.
Oh yeah, governance is I think super important, and I think like that's something we always think about when you build from scratch, right? So I'm not sure the exact question on governance. I'll see if I can find it, but permissions. And by the way, like 90% of my job today when I work with a large company is setting up governance. It's not that fun. Most of building AI systems is actually just setting up the right permissions and making sure the way companies can make sure that like still do everything they can, because obviously you don't want to like limit the scope of an employee, but you want to make sure that they're not going into systems that they shouldn't have access to, right? I'd love to show you my other governance slides, but where I walk through this, but that'll take me an hour. Generally, when we think about this, right, and I forgot to mention that on the monitoring screen that you have, only someone who edits and owns an agent can actually view that monitoring screen. And so the same thing happens when it comes to deciding permissions. An agent permissioned like an app or workflow, we have retool permissions for apps and workflow, will respect the permissions that uh, of the retool parameters and the tool calls, right? So your if you give it a tool that Bala doesn't have access to, it's not going to actually call that tool. And that's something that was like something we knew that was going to be a problem before going into the enterprise, right? Obviously, with the customers we have, they would never deploy a system like this that would not have this basic level of check. And yeah, so we think about stuff like very, very deeply, and even things like an agent calling an agent, what happens, and all those permissions fly. And there's a long chart over here that you can see what is used, what is edit, and what is own, even for like building these agents. Not everyone in the organization can go build these agents. They'll have access to certain resources. They can set up their own resources. So I can set up my own Google Calendar, let's say, but maybe I don't have access to any production data. And the nice thing is that since we already built the system for apps and workflows, we inherit a lot of that policy from the way we build apps and workflows. Anyway, hopefully that covers the specific example. Now, obviously, Retool was built for like building internal applications. And so I'm gonna like show you an agent inside of an application, almost like a thin agent, if you may, that's kind of in the background inside of your workflow, right? So you might have used an expense management platform. This is like anything like a Brex or a Ramp or a Razor, right? So it, you obviously need to have some sort of view for this. Either use a SaaS product or you have an internal tool for it. This is a Retool app, right? I can go ahead and go in edit mode, and this is the first, I would say, Retool product that was there, which is essentially allowing you to drag and drop specific components and actually build a web internal tool. Now, obviously, when I go into this, I want to like be intelligent about this, right? Like I want to make sure I'm able to actually sort of connect the things that I want. Like I want to still have a UI for my like uploading a receipt, but I don't want to do a lot of the like boring stuff like writing out this form, right? So I have this receipt from a dinner I did last week, and what we have done here is like actually just go inside of this as well before I'm gonna like make sure that when I put this, it's gonna actually call an LLM inside of Retool. So we have this LLM over here as well, and it's gonna extract the details of the receipt. Very simple. Nothing. You must have seen this use case come up many times. And but what's interesting is like that was like V1 of this. Yeah, this one. And it's going to take that receipt and do basic OCR kind of work, and it's going to tell me what I ordered. And as you notice, I changed the receipt, so the thing changed. And then this on the right hand side is my agent that I have added the chat for, but you don't need the chat necessarily, but it's nice because it shows me what it's going to do. So when I hit submit on this receipt, it's going to go ahead, take the receipt and the description on the left hand side, and it's going to now start thinking of like how to actually file this receipt and potentially even approve it for me instead of going to like my specific like manager or accounting team. There's an expense policy, there is an expense, like it's going to like add it, check the policy, right? And it's reading it from a Google Doc that we have. It's very simple, the expense policy. And also like I might not have submitted enough details, which happens to me all the time when I file expenses. I don't explain anything. Like this has pulled the wrong department for me. It's pulled the wrong resource. Actually, that was a team building event. But now it's going to see how much can I actually it's going to ask me a question. So it's not going to like run entirely on its own. It has a follow-up. It says the policy sets $50 limit. So tell me how many people were there. So let's say I was actually 3 people and we were just balling out and going out for dinner. So let's see what happens if it's 3 people. Right.
This is crazy.
So yeah, it's going to add this expense again. Now it's getting the approvers, right? So like, who are the people? These 4 guys, director, engineering, and my manager. And it thinks it's HR department. That's fine. And now it's going to say escalate it to a human. So it's going to escalate to my director. I know we don't want that, but let's assume we want that. And it said, I have notified Siddhantpuri that their expense requires human review. So it sent me an email. And now it's like filed. It's over the $50 per person policy. So it definitely needs a manual review, right? Similarly, like if I go ahead and now we rerun this with, let's say, a smaller receipt, it should like ideally, kind of do this on its own, not like go to my manager, right? So it's again going to pick up OCR. Business meeting lunch sounds accurate. And this thing over here is the agent. Like just I can go into the edit mode. I just pull the agent from the one that the agent screen that we have. It just drag and drop inside of this interface, by the way. And while thinking, it's like again looking at the prompt, breaking down the steps, deciding the step it needs to take. So it's correctly done. Add expense. Again, looked at the expense policy. And now it's asking me, this will help to, could you please specify how many people attended this lunch? I'll say 2. And hopefully that's under the limit like we saw with $50 was the limit.
Oh, wow. Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So basically it's going to hopefully, obviously live demos are always hard, but let's hope. I see like a lot of people might have more questions. Yeah, so now actually it has successfully realized that this is under the limit and it's going to automatically approve this expense now. And that means it's updating the expense in the table that doesn't require human approval and sending me an email that
Nice.
has been approved. Let's check the
And
sheet.
these just prompts, right? So there is no other configuration except prompts and tools.
Tools is the configuration. So, I mean, this has sent me an email. I can go into this expense management agent as well, right? So all it is this prompt. In fact, we just told it that this is what expense table looks like, right? You are the expense assistant with a new claim. It's a very small, short prompt. Like prompts can be short as long as the tools are like well set up, is what I will say. And the expense policy is nothing but a simple reading of this Google Doc. We have this native connector, which pulls the Google Doc, and then we have this escalated human workflow, which will essentially call another retool workflow with all the context of this user, and that will kind of do all the escalations they need to. Sending email, adding an expense, all the add expense does is adds it to the database, right? So we obviously need to store these expenses somewhere. So it'll be a basic like API endpoint that does the get and post requests.
Very nice.
And yeah, it's just 4.1. Very simple, like 0.2 temperature. Just simple CRUD. It's just like pulling from a database. Yeah, this is like getting the employee levels and returning the approvers that are allowed. And this is like very similar to how our actual Brex stuff runs. And I think I'm pretty sure this expense management tool is soon going to go into prod, but obviously based on the accounting team's approvals. We have a similar one that actually has gone live in production, which is a chargeback agent, which takes a customer support ticket and like accurately make sure whether the chargeback was a fraud or not. So yeah, I think with that, I think that's sort of the overview of like everything I had to show you today. Obviously, I'll take some questions. Um, the main thing I want you to do, like, take away is at the end of the day, we are sort of thinking about this as a unified platform, right? Where you will build all your AI applications. That could be apps, workflows, and agents. At the end of the day, we want to let you build intelligent systems that can reason, decide, act across your organization's data with security and like permissions in mind. So how do you scale this in production is something that we care about a lot. And with agents, you can build real tools for real work, and that's really the hope. We're excited to sort of see what people are building. Uh, and actually, like if you want to share this with people, you can, and you build something cool, you can actually go inside of the agent and even share it. So we are seeing like people on social media sharing these agents as well.
This is very, very interesting.
Yeah, so this specific run, I can just share this thread, and everyone on this chat can view it in this flow. So you can see exactly what I did here on your screen.
Wow. This is the like the best use of agent plus existing software I've seen.
Yeah, I
There
would
are
hope.
like agent creations. There are like SaaS, existing SaaS solutions may like people
Oh,
integrate things
sorry,
from.
that one's behind VPN. Yeah, I'll send you a different one. Yeah, what do you think, Bala?
No, I was just saying that this is pretty. This is one of the most interesting ways of integrating existing software plus AI agents. There are like agentic workflow specific tools, and there are SaaS companies which are trying to create like small AI products within them. But how do you do this at will? I think this is the best demo I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think we've been sort of very, very careful that, I think the customers we work with right now are obviously, and we compete with the like customers as well. I think everyone is building these agents. Right? Someone asked like, how's this from Claude MCP? It's very similar in the sense that everyone is giving access to tools. Everyone's trying to like set up a connection to the where your work happens. In fact, when I'm talking to newer companies like startups, they're not going to these like old SaaS tools, right? They're just starting on a Postgres database and building these things on their own. That's a bit more wild west. When you go to like the larger companies, they are their questions are all about, can I bring my own model, right? Like we're talking to one like large CPG company right now, which is saying, we build everything on top of OpenAI. Now we want to make sure that we get, we're seeing Claude or we're seeing Gemini. We can't add it right now because everything is built on top of the OpenAI API, right? So how do we be model agnostic? And they can't work with any of the model providers to be model agnostic, right? There's no way. Like, why would they want that? So it keeps us in an interesting like place, and where we thought we would best be suited to play in, right? We don't want to play in the model game at all, right? We're at the end of the day a way for people building internal applications that can be in production really fast, right? We want to make sure that in the future you're building internal. If you're building agents, you're not building tools because you don't have humans doing that job. You're building that in Retool.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. We're slightly over time. We'll just take a couple of questions. Folks, post questions if you have, or just feel free to unmute yourself and ask. But there is one question on RBAC, role-based access control. You already have a framework for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, all of that is inside of the permission screen. So I can just jump into it. So inside of like settings, whenever you're like setting up Retool, you will have a permission screen. And like what I talked about is you can create your own permission groups. So obviously, in our case, we have these custom groups, and then you can decide at all these levels, what access each person should have. So let's say I create a group for customer support. And inside of that group, I can specify customer support should have access to this specific, all these resources in this folder, this folder, and this folder, but none of these individual resources that these guys have created on their own. Similarly, which agents they should have access to. Maybe they have access only to the customer complaints agent. And so we think of this like very deeply. And also, like I said, if I give you access to an agent, but you don't have access to the underlying resource, it will actually in natural language respond that it can't run that specific tool, right? So want to be careful of inheriting RBAC, because people will accidentally give you the agent, not realizing you don't have actual edit permissions to the resource. So it's extremely granular at the app resource workflow agent level. Yeah. So hopefully that should answer your question, but I can answer like other questions about RBAC, and like you can follow up with me. I'm sid@retool.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, so anywhere you want to reach me, Bala will give you the details if you have specific.
Pretty active. Yeah, there is one last question from Kathy, if you can take that.
Yeah.
Oh, could we have a session later on building and maintaining guardrails?
Sure. I mean, I think governance is something that we really think about. I like can do a separate session, or if you have like folks, Bala, who want to do a, how do I build this agent maybe after a few weeks, when people have a chance to play around it, I can like teach them how to set up separate guardrails.
We'll do a poll internally.
Yeah.
Try to do all these. And they can just go. There is a free tier, right? Still to play around, or is all?
Yeah, there's a free tier. And honestly, like if you run into issues, I can sort of like make sure we can try and give you extension. The free tier comes with like 20 hours of free labor, so it should cover you for your individual agent. I'm pretty sure.
Very nice. Cool, man. Super. Awesome. Sid, thanks a lot. This was quite good.
I hope so. I think I tried to configure this agent multiple times last night, as you can see. It is not behaving like I wanted to. So I was like, okay, well, I guess we're gonna do a different one this morning. So
yeah, super amazing, man. Thank you so much, folks. Thanks for staying back. I know it's late, it's dinner time, etc. We'll record a session. We'll send out an email tomorrow with the link. And yeah, have a good night. Bye, Sid. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.